Chapter 61, Arrogant. Swoosh. 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 All the male students' gazes moved towards Yun Yan, Fang Yu, and Su Ling. The three of them had voluptuous figures that were very provocative. Su Ling's face immediately turned red and shy. She hurriedly hugged her chest with both hands, as did the other female students. As for Yun Yan and Fang Yu, they were calm and did not do a thing. At this moment, Instructor Shen's figure appeared. He swept his gaze over and said, "This is a high-level protective suit. When you break through to become a martial artist or even a master, this kind of protective suit will be indispensable. Therefore, get used to it as soon as possible. Don't be shy." He lowered his head to look at the time. "In 20 minutes, the combat practice will begin. You can team up or go alone. Your points will be based on the number of mutated beasts and foreign races you kill. Of course, since this is your first time dealing with them, I suggest that you work together." With that said, his figure disappeared. Su Ling bit her lower lip and let go of her arm. Zhou Hao looked over. "What are you looking at?" Su Ling glared at Zhou Hao with a red face. Zhou Hao pursed his lips angrily and turned to look at Yun Yan and Fang Yu. Among them, Yun Yan's aura was the most outstanding and her figure. Advertisement. Was almost perfect. Slap. All of a sudden, Su Ling slapped Zhou Hao's shoulder. "Don't look at them." She bit her lip. Zhou Hao was speechless. "Su Ling, did I offend you recently?" Su Ling snorted. "In any case, you're not allowed to look. Rather than thinking about such things, why don't you start thinking about what to do during the combat practice?" Zhou Hao said indifferently, "What is there to think about? We just need to charge at them." "You." Su Ling stomped her foot angrily. "All right, I was just joking with you. You, and Zhang Yi and I are all from class 4, so we naturally have to work together. You have to help us out a little later." Zhou Hao's tone changed as he smiled. Zhang Yi walked over and nodded in agreement. "Su Ling, Zhou Hao is right." Su Ling also knew that they were more familiar with each other since they were in the same class. Moreover, the students from the other classes were all gathered together, forming small cliques amongst themselves. "All right, the three of us will be in the same group. Zhang Yi, you'll be in charge of defense, and I'll be in charge of killing the mutated beasts and the foreign races." As Su Ling spoke, she glared at Zhou Hao. "As for you, you'll be in charge of staying alert and warning us of any danger." Zhou Hao immediately said, "Su Ling, you're underestimating me too much. After all, I've killed a mutated beast before." Su Ling said disdainfully, "Are you really bringing that up? Don't you remember how you killed him?" Zhou Hao couldn't be bothered to retort. On the other hand, Yuan Cheng, Yun Yan, and the others smiled and said, "This is our first combat practice at Chu City High School. Let's perform well and show these students of Chu City High School what it means to be a true genius." Fang Yu nodded. "Agreed. I can't wait to see the dumbfounded expressions of these bumpkins." The other two boys laughed and said, "I think we should restrain ourselves a little and not shock them too much." They spoke openly, so Su Ling, Zhang Yi, and the other students naturally heard it. How arrogant! It can't be helped. They're geniuses from the Yanjing training camp. Didn't you hear Instructor Shen say that each of their combat strengths is comparable to a high-level martial artist? Yeah, they have the strength to be arrogant. They sighed softly. Su Ling frowned. She could not stand Fang Yu's arrogant attitude, but she also knew that if they were to really compete, the five of them could indeed crush them. However, there were still students who were furious and shouted, "What are you being cocky for? Our Chu City High School's peerless genius is even able to kill a high-level demon general." Upon hearing this, the other students reacted and their eyes lit up. "That's right. Our Chu City High School is not weak either. Our genius was able to kill 3 high-level demon generals. Even a high-level grandmaster like Instructor Shen is no match for a high-level demon general. If our peerless genius took action, these Yanjing geniuses wouldn't even be qualified to compete against him. That's right. Many students immediately shouted. When Fang Yu heard this, she could not help but sneer. Haha, you guys sure are good at making up lies. Peerless genius? To be able to kill a high-level demon general, one has to at least have the strength of a grandmaster. Given how terrible your school is, it's already not bad if you guys can deal with low-level demon warriors. The other two boys also laughed. Fang Yu, don't discourage them. You have to let him dream. Haha, I've seen people brag, but I've never seen anyone brag so ridiculously. Let them dream. In a while, they'll see the difference between dream and reality. Chapter 62, Chaos. Facing the ridicule and disdain from Fang Yu and the other Yanjing geniuses, the students from Chu City High School who were participating in the focused training class all glared at them and clenched their fists tightly, looking as if they were prepared to fight the Yanjing geniuses to the death. Previously, they did not feel anything when Fang Yu and the others mocked and belittled him. After all, the other party had the strength to be arrogant, but now, Fang Yu and the other geniuses were actually belittling the peerless genius in the school. This had crossed their bottom line. It made them explode in an uproar. It had to be known that they all worshipped and respected the hidden peerless genius of the school from the bottom of their hearts. To a certain extent, their respect towards the peerless genius even surpassed their respect towards their teachers and Instructor Shen of the school. After all, that peerless genius had single-handedly killed 3 high-level beast generals. Not only had the genius saved their lives, but he had also saved the lives of countless other students in the school. It could be said that the peerless genius was their second parent. How could they tolerate their second parent being insulted? Seeing the other students' reaction, Fang Yu continued indifferently, "What? Do you want to fight it out?" Another fat boy, Lei Jinpeng, waved the saber in his hand heavily forward and sneered, "You guys think you can take us? I'll fight all of you at once. If I take more than 10 seconds to defeat all of you, I'll consider it to be your victory." The students of Chu City High School, including Su Ling, were even more furious. They were simply too cocky. A student could not help himself and said, "Fine, let's go. Even if I end up being ranked last, I'll drag you down with me." The other students chimed in. Yuan Cheng and Yun Yan shook their heads secretly when they saw this scene. Although Fang Yu and the others had indeed gone overboard with their words, they still thought that these students from Chu City High School were really overestimating their capabilities. In a situation where the difference in strength was too great, rashness and anger alone were unable to resolve the problem. Did Instructor Shen transfer us here to nurture this group of people? Yuan Cheng and Yun Yan looked at each other and were extremely disappointed. Chi! Chi! Just as the group was about to fight, red-eyed rabbits suddenly appeared from the surrounding weeds. These rabbits had huge teeth that protruded from both sides of their mouths, making them look abnormally hideous. Not good, it's the violent tooth rabbit. Most of the students were shocked and panicked. The violent tooth rabbit was not a mutated beast like the tusk boar. Instead, it was a true low-level demon warrior. "Run!" a student shouted. As soon as they heard this, many students turned around and fled. Facing a low-level demon warrior, their first reaction was to flee. Fang Yu and the other Yanjing geniuses laughed when they saw this. "Haha, I've really overestimated you guys. A group of low-level demon warriors actually scared you away." Su Ling, Zhang Yi, and the others looked ashamed, so they immediately stopped. However, the other students still ran for their lives, not daring to stop at all. Pu! Pu! At this moment, Yuan Cheng, Yun Yan, and the other transfer students attacked. The sabers in their hands brought with them an afterimage as they killed all the violent tooth rabbits that pounced over. Their movements were clean and sharp. In less than 10 seconds, more than half of the 30-plus violent tooth rabbits had been killed by the 5 of them. However, there were still 3 to 4 violent tooth rabbits that pounced towards Su Ling, Zhang Yi, and Zhou Hao's temporary team. "Zhang Yi, get ready to help me," Su Ling shouted. Seeing that Yun Yan and Fang Yu had easily killed the violent tooth rabbit, she was a little unwilling to lose to them. Zhou Hao, who was hiding behind, stretched his back. These low-level demon warriors were similar to ants to him. If he circulated his blood essence slightly, he would be able to kill them. Therefore, he felt rather bored looking at the nervous Zhang Yi and Su Ling. However, he did not plan to attack. After all, they were only low-level demon warriors. With Su Ling and Zhang Yi's strength, as long as they calmed down, they would be able to deal with them easily. "Su Ling, take the left." Although Zhou Hao did not plan to attack, he had not forgotten the task Su Ling had assigned him. He shouted without even looking. Su Ling subconsciously turned to the left and saw that there was no sign of the violent tooth rabbit at all. She could not help but turn around and glare at Zhou Hao. "Why are you still joking at a time like this? Be careful!" Zhang Yi suddenly shouted. At the same time, he took a step forward and blocked in front of Su Ling. However, Zhou Hao was even faster. He stretched out his hand and pulled Su Ling towards him. "What are you doing?" Su Ling almost bumped into Zhou Hao's chest, her beautiful face revealing embarrassment and anger. Swoosh! Swoosh! Right then, the 2 violent tooth rabbit that were pouncing towards them suddenly made a turn. Their figures actually pounced towards them from the left. Zhang Yi hurriedly blocked with his saber. However, the attack of the violent tooth rabbit was too fast and violent, and it actually threw Zhang Yi to the ground. It was only at this moment that Su Ling reacted. She ignored her embarrassment and anger, raised her saber, seized the opportunity, and slashed straight at the violent tooth rabbit's neck. Rip! Blood splattered as the violent tooth rabbit's head fell. Su Ling did not look relieved at all. She kicked with all her strength and sent the other violent tooth rabbit that was biting Zhang Yi's protective suit flying. Zhang Yi slapped the ground and jumped to his feet. Pu! Pu! The 2 of them immediately worked together and killed the other violent tooth rabbits. Of the 4 that had pounced over earlier, 2 rushed towards the other Wang Ming, Li Ji, and the others. Phew, that was close. Su Ling patted her bulging chest. Zhang Yi nodded and said in fear, "That's right. Fortunately, you reacted quickly. Otherwise, I would have died." The violent tooth rabbit's teeth were extremely sharp. Even coming into contact with them would cause one's skin to be pierced. Although this was a virtual training environment, everything still felt very real. Su Ling looked at Zhang Yi and shook her head lightly. "I should be the one thanking you. If you hadn't helped me out by blocking in time, I would have been the one who would have been pounced on." Zhang Yi waved his hand. "Su Ling, that wasn't me. That was Zhou Hao. Don't forget that he was the one who reminded you to watch your left." Su Ling then remembered Zhou Hao's reminder. She could not help but turn around. "Zhou Hao, how did you know that the violent tooth rabbit would attack us from the left?" "Of course it was a guess. Do you even need to ask?" Zhou Hao said without thinking. Su Ling's expression darkened as she raised her fist and punched Zhou Hao's shoulder. Zhou Hao pretended to be in pain. "Be gentle. If you don't want me to hammer you to death, you better tell the truth," Su Ling shouted. "Ahem. I'll be honest, so don't do anything rash." Zhou Hao laughed dryly. "Actually, I just wanted to take advantage of you during the chaos." Su Ling immediately understood and her face turned red. She raised her foot and kicked Zhou Hao. Shameless. At this moment, Yuan Chang, Yun Yan, and the others, who had finished killing the violent tooth rabbits, walked over. Upon seeing this scene, Fang Yu could not help but sneer, "I'm really impressed. To think these 2 would dare to flirt in the wilderness. They're indeed a bunch of rookies." Chapter 63, This is the effect I want. Lei Jinpeng laughed. This should be Su Ling. It's said that she's the best student in Chu City High School. Now it seems that she's not too bad. I can't say the same for her taste in men. Su Ling's expression changed, but before she could speak, a voice sounded beside her. I don't know if Su Ling's taste in men is bad, but I do know that you guys are pretty distasteful. Swoosh. Swoosh. Fang Yu and Lei Jinpeng's gazes moved to Zhou Hao. Humph, a first-level blood essence trash dares to speak. As she spoke, she took a step forward and instantly crossed to Zhou Hao. She raised her hand and waved it down. Bang. Su Ling reacted quickly. She hurriedly grabbed Fang Yu's arm and stopped her palm beside Zhou Hao's face. Zhou Hao's expression did not change. He would have been able to dodge it instantly anyway. However, this scene made Fang Yu sneer. She retracted her palm and turned around to look at Su Ling. You're really degrading yourself by defending such trash. I was only testing you just now. This trash was probably shock silly when I did that. As she spoke, she dusted her hands and said disdainfully, Don't worry, I won't go so far as to bully a piece of trash. Lei Jinpeng shrugged. Sister Fang, let's go. It's really meaningless to waste our time with such a group of newbies. Let's go bully the demon beasts. Yuan Cheng and Yun Yan were already walking in front. Fang Yu, Lei Jinpeng, and the other transfer student quickly followed. Looking at their figures, Zhang Yi gritted his teeth and said, They're too much. Su Ling's eyes were cold. They're only a few steps ahead of us. If we work hard, we'll catch up sooner or later. Zhang Yi nodded heavily. Zhou Hao, are you all right? Seeing that Zhou Hao was still stunned on the spot, Su Ling could not help but ask softly. She was still a little touched by Zhou Hao defending her just now. Zhou Hao smiled. I'm fine. Su Ling did not say anything else. Let's go and kill the demon beasts. Let's try to find some lone demon warriors to hone our teamwork. In the virtual training room, Instructor Shen, Principal Zheng, and the others stood at the podium and looked at an electronic screen that showed the footage of every student. Instructor, these Yanjing geniuses are really not bad. Moreover, they work together very well and are extremely vigilant. Even when facing a low-level demon warrior like the violent Tooth Rabbit, they don't relax at all. Department Director Hong, who was standing at the side, had praise in his eyes. The dean nodded in agreement and sighed. That's right. As expected of students from the Yanjing training camp. The Yanjing training camp truly is far superior to our Chu City High School in all aspects. Instructor Shen said indifferently, It's nothing. Be it resources, technology, or teachers, the training camps in Yanjing are all top-notch in the country. They're also ranked at the forefront of all the cities in the world. If these students from the Yanjing training camp weren't well nurtured, it'll simply be a humiliation to our country. Although these guys aren't top-notch geniuses, they all have good potential and are ranked at the top of the list in the Yanjing training camp. Department Director Hong, the Dean, and Principal Zheng finally understood. Of course, Instructor Shen's tone changed as he revealed a smile. However, his eyes were burning with passion. Compared to that peerless genius from our Chu City High School, they're still far inferior. Hearing this, Principal Zheng and the others immediately smiled proudly. After all, it was true. Yuan Cheng and the other geniuses were strong and had outstanding performances in various aspects, but they still only had the strength of intermediate-level martial artists and were comparable to high-level martial artists. As for the peerless genius of Chu City High School, he was an existence that could kill high-level demon generals. Instructor Shen, do you think that the peerless genius is really on the list? Principal Zheng couldn't help but ask. The purpose of establishing the focused training class this time was not only to nurture that peerless genius. In fact, they all knew very well that the so-called cultivation resources of the training class were really of little value to that genius. Instructor Shen stared at the screen and said confidently, "Don't worry, that genius must be among these people. After the 2 assessment competitions, I already have some ideas." Seeing that Instructor Shen knew what to do, Principal Zheng could not help but feel relieved. On the other hand, the dean was somewhat worried. "Instructor Shen, this is the first time that the students have ever participated in a virtual combat training. I'm afraid that they will perform poorly. If they compare themselves to geniuses like you and Chen, they will very likely suffer a huge blow. It's fine. This is the effect I want. Only by being pressured can you truly unleash your potential," Instructor Shen said indifferently. Chapter 64, Combat Talent. In the virtual environment, the students of the training basically teamed up with the students of their own classes. Each team had 3 to 5 students, and they were barely able to handle the low-level demon warriors who were alone. Once the number of low-level demon warriors exceeded 5, the teams would end up in a sorry state. Some teams were even wiped out in 10 minutes. Principal Zheng, who was staring at the screen, looked embarrassed. The dean's face also turned pale. Zhou Hao, Su Yi, and Su Ling moved slowly vigilantly beside the weeds. The deeper into the wilderness they were, the more they understood that the blood essence realm did not mean combat strength. For example, Su Ling had already reached the 3rd level of blood essence and was very close to reaching the peak. If she went all out, it would not be difficult for her to kill low-level demon warriors. However, the fact was that she could at most handle 2 low-level demon warriors. On the other hand, Zhang Yi performed slightly better. He had 2nd level blood essence, but he was able to easily kill a low-level demon warrior. Moreover, the more dangerous the situation, the calmer he became. This is probably what they call combat talent. Zhou Hao thought to himself as he looked at Zhang Yi, who was walking in front. Swoosh! Swoosh! The weeds swayed. Zhang Yi immediately stopped and stretched out his hand. Su Ling nodded and walked towards Zhang Yi. Zhou Hao, who was standing behind the 2 of them, had long figured out the situation in the weeds. Because there were only a few mutated beasts, he couldn't be bothered to tell them. A moment later, several corpses appeared beside Su Ling and Zhang Yi. Their foreheads were covered in sweat. Clearly, even mutated beasts made them extremely nervous. They looked at the relaxed Zhou Hao. Su Ling could not help but be furious. "Zhou Hao, at least try to help out." Zhou Hao said helplessly, "Su Ling, you were the one who asked me to be on alert and warn you guys if anything happened." Fine. You can join in on the action later," Su Ling snorted. "All right, but you have to take care of me. After all, I'm too weak." Zhou Hao was not worried about being looked down on at all. Su Ling also knew that it would be difficult for Zhou Hao to participate in killing the demon beasts. She immediately nodded. "I'll try my best." The 3 of them continued to move forward. As they entered the depths of the wilderness, the flourishing weeds gradually disappeared. Huge ancient trees blocked the sky and sun, causing the light to dim. "Be careful. This place should be at the boundary of the demon beast area." Su Ling's cold face was full of vigilance. Her gaze kept sweeping around as she tightly gripped the saber in her hand. Zhang Yi was the same. Only Zhou Hao looked very relaxed. It couldn't be helped. He was too powerful. Even if he wanted to pretend to be nervous, it was impossible for his body to be as tense as Su Ling and Zhang Yi. Roar! Waves of roars sounded from the distance. The somewhat sinister environment seemed very terrifying. Zhou Hao's ears twitched as he reminded softly, "Su Ling, Zhang Yi, don't keep looking around." Su Ling could not help but turn around and glare at Zhou Hao. "If we don't look around, where can we look? Also, keep your voice down. Don't attract the demon warriors." Zhou Hao was speechless. He poked his finger up. "Don't forget that we're still under a tree." Su Ling reacted and hurriedly looked up. When she did, her face turned pale with fear. On the branches of the ancient trees around them, there were 3 green pythons looking at them coldly with their scarlet tongues. Joe Hao, you Jenks. Su Ling's body was tense to the limit as she stared fixedly at the 3 green pythons. Zhang Yi also noticed the pythons at this moment and quickly calmed down. It's an intermediate level demon warrior, the fire pattern green python. What should we do? Su Ling gritted her teeth. What else can we do? Run. We need to try our best to escape. Zhang Yi nodded, his eyes revealing determination. Su Ling, Zhou Hao, you two run first. I'll stay behind to attract more attention. No, it's too dangerous. You won't survive if you stay. Su Ling refused decisively. Zhou Hao could not help but look at Zhang Yi again. He did not expect Zhang Yi to have such a self-sacrificing personality. If he maintained this personality in the real wilderness, he would be very welcomed by any martial artist team. It's fine. It's just a virtual battle anyway, not real. At most, I'll lose some points. Zhang Yi smiled and said, all right, don't waste time. Run. Zhou Hao shrugged and couldn't help but say, Zhang Yi, Su Ling, stop wasting your time arguing. None of us will be able to escape. The fire pattern green python is a rare type of snake that travels in packs. There are definitely more than just 3 of them around. As soon as he said this, Su Ling and Zhang Yi's expressions changed drastically. Only then did they remember that their teacher in the foreign race biology class had once mentioned the habits and characteristics of the fire pattern green python. We have to give it our all. Zhang Yi gritted his teeth. I'll kill as many as I can. Su Ling's pretty face froze. Only when she got to a desperate situation where she could no longer retreat would her potential be activated. However, Zhou Hao was the first to turn around and run. Su Ling and Zhang Yi were both speechless. This coward. Su Ling gritted her teeth in anger. Chapter 65, You're about to die, let me hug you. However, soon, Zhou Hao's voice sounded. What are you all waiting for? Why aren't you guys running? The fire pattern python doesn't leave the trees easily. If we're lucky, we should be able to escape. Su Ling and Zhang Yi's eyes lit up when they heard this. Without thinking, they turned around and ran. Zhou Hao, you disloyal fellow. Didn't you say just now that none of us would be able to escape? As Su Ling ran, she did not forget to lecture Zhou Hao. Sorry, I didn't really pay attention in biology class. I almost forgot about the other habits of the fire pattern green python. Zhou Hao said with a smile. Swoosh. Swoosh. As soon as the 3 of them ran, the fire pattern green pythons on the ancient tree moved. Its long and narrow body nimbly intertwined with the ancient trees. Then, they jumped out like monkeys at an extremely fast speed. 2 of them attacked Zhou Hao. Damn, don't chase me. Zhou Hao did not know if anyone was watching this virtual combat training, so he did not want to reveal his strength. Instead, he pretended to be flustered like in the assessment competition. After running for a few steps, he staggered and fell to the ground. As the fire pattern green python pounced over, Zhou Hao coincidentally stepped on the saber that was still on the ground. The saber bounced up and directly killed the python. He did something similar to kill the other python. After dealing with the 2 pythons, he narrowed his eyes and quickly rushed towards Su Ling. Soon, Su Ling saw Zhou Hao. Su Ling, save me. 2 green pythons are chasing me. Zhou Hao hurriedly shouted. Zhou Hao, you bastard. Su Ling cursed angrily. Zhou Hao rushed to a spot not far from Su Ling and pretended to trip as he pounced on her. At the same time, his palm suddenly slapped his saber, causing it to fly in an arc and stab into the head of another python. Get lost. Su Ling pushed Zhou Hao away forcefully, her pretty face filled with embarrassment and anger. Zhou Hao could not help but say, it's really soft. Su Ling was extremely embarrassed and furious. She kicked Zhou Hao's leg. Zhou Hao, if you continue to do this, I'll definitely ignore you in the future. Seeing that Su Ling was indeed angry, Zhou Hao hurriedly explained, Su Ling, I really didn't do it on purpose. Su Ling gritted her teeth. Of course, she could tell that Zhou Hao only fell on her because he had tripped. However, she was still furious that Zhou Hao had taken advantage of her. However, the situation was critical now, and she couldn't continue to lose her temper. Swoosh! Swoosh! The other fire-pattern green pythons circled around the ancient trees and chased after them. What are you waiting for? Run! Su Ling kicked Zhou Hao and pulled him away. Zhou Hao pretended to come back to his senses and grabbed the saber. The two of them seemed to be fast, but they were actually much slower than the fire-pattern green pythons. It did not take long for them to be surrounded by the 4 fire-pattern green pythons. I don't think we can get away. Su Ling smiled bitterly and sighed. Zhou Hao smiled. It's good that I get to die with you. Su Ling rolled her eyes angrily. Screw you. All you know is how to talk glibly. Zhou Hao saw a fire-pattern green python pounce towards them from behind Su Ling and immediately said, Su Ling, since we're about to die, let me hug you. Before Su Ling could react, she was already in Zhou Hao's arms. Boom! The python that pounced over directly collided with the tip of the saber Zhou Hao raised. The momentum behind its pounce pushed Su Ling down onto Zhou Hao. You're still, Su Ling was about to curse when she felt a heat flow from her neck. She couldn't help but turn her head and see the head of the fire-pattern green python hanging down. Zhou Hao said innocently, Su Ling, this really has nothing to do with me. Su Ling was ashamed, angry, and afraid, but she did not blame Zhou Hao anymore. Get up quickly. After the two of them got up, Su Ling suddenly saw another python pounce over from behind Zhou Hao. She hurriedly grabbed her saber and slashed out without thinking. Zhou Hao actually knew everything that was happening around him like the back of his hand. Seeing Su Ling attack, he hurriedly turned around and retreated before pushing Su Ling's shoulder lightly. Immediately, a huge force was transmitted onto Su Ling's saber. Rip! The saber cut through the python like tofu. The remaining 2 pythons also pounced over. Zhou Hao used the same trick and helped Su Ling kill them both. At this point, the 4 intermediate-level demon warriors had all died. Su Ling looked at the 4 python corpses in a daze and said in disbelief, Did I kill them? Zhou Hao chuckled and said, Of course. Who else could it be but you? Su Ling, when did you become so powerful? Don't tell me you broke through and became a martial artist. Su Ling regained her senses. Do you really think it's that easy to become a martial artist? Forget it, you won't understand anyway. Let's hurry up and find Zhang Yi.